So I got to check out the Xiaomi Mi 8 back in June, and I had some pretty mixed thoughts about the design. First of all, it looks exactly like an iPhone, and I know that a lot of Android manufacturers have been accused of making iPhone clones over the years, but this phone in particular looks pretty much exactly like an iPhone X, down to the camera module placement. But I still really wanted to get my hands on one of these phones because in theory, the Mi 8 offers a ton of value to the consumer. It's still got all the same flagship specs that pretty much every flagship in 2018 has so far, but it comes in at just under $400, which is like half the price of every other flagship right now. But before we talk about that nitty-gritty stuff, I really just want to talk about the design. And like I said before, it looks like an iPhone. And I kind of now understand why it looks like an iPhone. Xiaomi's primary market is China. And if you go out and try to buy an iPhone X in China, it's gonna run you like $1,200. In contrast, if you go out and try to buy a Mi 8, it's gonna cost you like $390 or just a little bit less than $400. That means you could buy like 3 Mi 8s for the price of one iPhone X. Xiaomi is definitely trying to undercut Apple here. I mean, their hardware is still really good. Like, in my opinion, it's almost just as good as the iPhone X. And when you can offer flagship specs that are pretty much the same as every other Android manufacturer, that's a lot of value for the money. And that being said, the hardware is just kind of boring. I mean, it just kind of looks like a black iPhone, and there's not any gimmicky features that are gonna make you run out and immediately buy this thing. It does have an IR-based face unlock feature, which is only really seen in like the iPhone X and the Oppo Find X. So that's pretty nice, but I don't think that it's a deal breaker for people that are looking for specific features in a phone. And even though the hardware is pretty boring, the camera is actually pretty good. It has a lot of dynamic range and really good sharpness. And there's actually this auto enhance feature in the gallery app, which just kind of brings up the shadows and makes everything look a little bit better if you actually turn it on. The MIUI 10 update in this phone actually enabled front-facing portrait mode, and it's actually really good. I mean, it's not gonna rival like the Pixel 2 or anything like that, but it's a lot better than a lot of other flagships that are twice the price of this thing. So that's kind of all there is to say about the hardware, and I know that wasn't really a lot, but I really think that the software is where this phone really shines. As a little bit of background, MIUI actually existed before any Xiaomi phones actually were made. So they originally were formed as a competitor to CyanogenMod, if you remember that. Us geeks and nerds used to flash our phones like every other day just to try different like ROMs of Android, and MIUI was like a major competitor to CyanogenMod. After a while, the company pretty much decided they should just make a phone, and their business strategy has been really good so far. They're still undercutting a lot of other people in the market, and they're making really great hardware, even if it's a little bit boring. And MIUI is really where this phone shines. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's very similar to stock Android, and they're using a lot of Google apps in replacement of like actually making their own apps for things. They've also got a Mi community app, which is built right into the phone where you can go and leave feedback and vote on changes, and then you might even see one of these changes in your phone within 2 weeks. That's pretty crazy, and I've only really seen companies like Essential pay that much attention to their customers. And I mentioned this earlier, but the phone was just updated to MIUI 10.0. And it's not a huge update. It's not like they actually moved to Android 9 Pie. They still haven't done that yet, but they did make it look like Pie, which is kind of the interesting thing. They've added all those bubbly UI elements that are in Material Design 2.0, and even like the volume sliders and everything have changed to this kind of bubbly, googly design. But unfortunately, everything's not perfect in the UI. There's been a bit of controversy that's popped up lately where users have been seeing ads in their UI. And that's kind of a problem. Now, I actually talked to Xiaomi about this, and they told me that they use ads like this to subsidize the price of their phones and just make them a little bit cheaper. But in my opinion, if they're not upfront with people about the fact that they're doing this, this is kind of a huge problem. If you went and bought like a Kindle from Amazon and you got the version with ads, it's very obvious that you're getting ads on your tablet. But if you just go and buy a Mi 8, it doesn't say this phone comes with ads on the box, so you kind of just need to be aware of that. Now personally, I haven't actually seen any ads on my Mi 8, so I don't really know if it's gonna happen in every phone or if it's just a few use cases, but it's still really annoying that they would put that there. And if you can ignore those problems, then overall this phone is still a really good phone. I mean, like I said, the hardware is like a little bit boring, but it's really just made to complement MIUI. It's not like the Mi Mix 2 or Mi Mix 2S, which has really interesting hardware. It's more of just simplistic and kind of boring hardware to complement the UI. And all that leads us to what I like to call the Poco problem. So if you've been on YouTube in the last like month or two, you've probably heard of this phone called the Poco F1. Now, this is by a brand called Pocophone, which is actually a subsidiary of Xiaomi, which is a little bit strange. They spun off from Xiaomi, but they offer another flagship phone with pretty much the exact same specs as the Mi 8 for $300, which is $100 less. Not only that, but this phone has a headphone jack, uses a Kevlar back instead of a glass back, which a lot of people might find better or worse, it's up to you. And it's got a massive 4,000 milliamp hour battery, which is a lot better than the Mi 8, because the Mi 8 gets pretty average battery life, but it's really nothing special. Now the issue here is like, yeah, the Poco F1 is a sub-brand, but it's better than the Mi 8 in almost every single way, and it's $100 less. So when I was talking to Xiaomi, I asked them about this, and I said, why does the Poco F1 exist if you're trying to still sell Mi 8s? They told me that they think that there is room for both phones in the market, but I just don't really see that happening. Why would you not go out and buy a Poco F1, which has a headphone jack, again, has a headphone jack, and a 4,000 milliamp hour battery? Now they were like, oh, you know, on the Mi 8 you get the glass design and you get the AMOLED screen, but in my opinion, I don't think that those are things that are gonna make you want to buy the Mi 8 over the Poco F1. Now this reviews are a little bit weird, right? Because I still really like the Xiaomi Mi 8, it's still a really good phone, but the Poco F1 is just kind of a better phone, and it's cheaper, and it's made by the same company. And I'm not trying to like skew your thoughts. If you're thinking of getting a Mi 8, it's still a great phone, but I'd really recommend you look at the Poco F1 first. You just have to remember that nothing really exists in a bubble, and when something like this exists, especially when it's effectively made by the same company, you should probably be looking at that instead. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. I know it's like a little bit boring, but that's because the hardware is kind of boring. It just kind of looks like an iPhone, but the software is really where it's at. So if you haven't tried MIUI, I definitely recommend it. If you have any questions, make sure you leave them in the comment section, do your thing. You guys know how this works. Because of course, we are your source for all things Android.